In the report, West described administering LSD and other drugs in conjunction with hypnosis on unwitting human subjects, and then he made a remarkable claim. He announced that he had learned how to replace true memories with false memories in people without their knowledge. In other words, he clarified, it has been found to be feasible to take the memory of a definite event in the life of an individual and, through hypnotic suggestion, bring about the subsequent conscious recall to the effect that this event never actually took place, but that a different fictional event actually did occur. If West's report was accurate, this was not the failure agency officials described in 1977.
Tom O'Neill is not a member of Congress. He is not a prosecutor. He is an investigative journalist who walked into this hearing with something more dangerous than an accusation. He walked in with a warning. This is not just a story about what the CIA did decades ago. It is about what happens when the government experiments in secret, hides the record, and then tells the public there is nothing left to see. Who gets experimented on? Who gives consent? Who controls the files? And who pays the price when the truth is buried for 50 years? O'Neill came with names, archives, and documents. But the real question is bigger. If the record was hidden once, could it be happening again?
After becoming intrigued by the allegations against West, I learned that UCLA, his last academic home, had inherited his paper following his death in 1999. Nearly 2 months and more than 200 boxes later, I found the proverbial needle in a haystack: correspondence between West and Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the architect of MKULTRA. The letters begin in 1953, just 2 months after CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized the program, and while West was stationed at the Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where he was chief psychiatrist at the base hospital. In his first letter to Gottlieb, West proposed conducting experiments on unwitting human subjects, including military personnel, prisoners, and psychiatric patients at the base hospital. He then outlined the experiments themselves in 6 more pages that could have been written by Joseph Mengele. Using LSD in combination with hypnosis, West proposed inducing confusion, amnesia, and specific mental disorders in people who would remember nothing of their interaction with him afterward. He sought to develop techniques to extract true information and implant false information in unwilling subjects and to alter the attitudes and beliefs of, quote, previously loyal individuals. In other words, to completely switch their allegiance from one group or leader to another. But it was another sentence at the end of that letter that stopped me cold. These experiments, he wrote, must eventually be put to test in practical trials in the field. Gottlieb's response could hardly have been more enthusiastic. My good friend, he wrote, I had been wondering whether your apparent rapid and comprehensive grasp of our problems could possibly be real. You have indeed developed an admirably accurate picture of exactly what we are after. West replied that there was no more vital undertaking conceivable in these times. There was another document in West's papers that had even more significant implications. It was a 14-page report that West wrote in 1956, just 3 years after he contracted with the CIA. In the report, West described administering LSD and other drugs in conjunction with hypnosis on unwitting human subjects, and then he made a remarkable claim. He announced that he had learned how to replace true memories with false memories in people without their knowledge. In other words, he clarified, it has been found to be feasible to take the memory of a definite event in the life of an individual and, through hypnotic suggestion, bring about the subsequent conscious recall to the effect that this event never actually took place, but that a different fictional event actually did occur. If West's report was accurate, this was not the failure agency officials described in 1977, quite the opposite. It was, in fact, the central ambition of the MKUltra operation, the means of gaining the ability to seize the control of a person's perceptions, memories, and ultimately their behavior. But there was still one more discovery, and this time I found it in the National Security Archives at George Washington University, the official repository of the CIA's MKUltra records, which were released to Congress after the 1977 hearings. In those holdings was a different versions of West's 1956 report. The original paper had been replaced by a 4-page summary that did not exist in West's files and appears to have been written by someone else. His claims about replacing memories were gone. In their place was a theoretical discussion of LSD in dissociative states. The version supplied to Congress concluded that the effects of LSD and similar drugs on dissociative states had, and I'm quoting, never been studied. Never been studied. In the original report, West discusses observations from his own experiments, including detailed descriptions of using LSD to, as he wrote, speed the induction of the hypnotic state and deepen the trance in subjects. Those passages have been removed in the report turned over to Congress. The discrepancy could not have been more stark. Nearly 50 years ago, another congressional committee believed it had been given the truth about MKUltra. It had not. In conclusion, I respectfully submit that these records, some newly available and others that remained outside the government's disclosure for decades, warrant a thorough re-examination of what the program accomplished, what Congress was told, and what may still remain hidden. I'm happy to provide the documents I've referenced today, and I've provided many additional details in my written testimony.
In 1977, according to O'Neill, the CIA told Congress that MKUltra had failed. That was the official answer. The program was immoral, yes. Reckless, yes. But in the end, they said it did not work. Then O'Neill brings the record. Not rumor, not a theory from the internet. Files, archives, names, dates. He testified that he went through more than 200 boxes of Jolyon West's papers at UCLA. He says he found correspondence between West and Sidney Gottlieb, the man identified as the architect of MKUltra. According to O'Neill, those letters began in 1953, just 2 months after CIA Director Allen Dulles authorized the program. And what was in the record? According to the testimony, West proposed experiments on unwitting human subjects, military personnel, prisoners, and psychiatric patients. The document, as O'Neill describes it, involved LSD, hypnosis, confusion, amnesia, false information, and the alteration of loyalties in previously loyal people. Then comes the line that changes the temperature of the room. These experiments, West allegedly wrote, must eventually be put to test in practical trials in the field. That is not just research language, that is operational language. Then O'Neill points to a 1956 report. According to his testimony, West described administering LSD and other drugs with hypnosis on unwitting subjects. He says West claimed it was feasible to replace a real memory with a fictional one without the subject knowing. That is the permanent record O'Neill is asking Congress to confront, because the other side's answer does not solve the problem. Calling MKUltra a failure does not explain why these files existed. It does not explain why the original report allegedly described experiments, while the version supplied to Congress allegedly removed the most explosive claims. It does not explain why one version discussed observations, and another version said the effects had never been studied. That is the conflict. Studied or never studied, documented or redacted, a complete record or a managed record. And this is where the story stops being old history, because if the government can experiment in secret, control the files, redact the damage, and wait 50 years before the public sees the timeline, then accountability becomes optional. And ordinary people are the ones who pay for that. Patients, prisoners, veterans, poor communities, anyone without power, anyone told, trust the institution. The record is complete. A democracy cannot function on secret files and selective memory. Congressional oversight only matters if Congress gets the real documents. Public trust only survives if the public record is not edited into obedience. O'Neill did not prove every dark conclusion people may draw from MKUltra, but he did put a pattern in front of Congress. Names, files, a timeline, a missing contradiction, and one question the government still has not answered. If the truth was buried once, who is making sure it is not being buried now?